Jack always left the house at 7 a.m. sharp. Not 6:59. Not 7:01. The door would click shut with a soft finality that echoed louder than it should have in our small apartment. I'd sit at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee, pretending I wasn't waiting for the silence. I used to find it comforting, his discipline, his precision. But lately it felt like I was living with a ghost program to wake, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Jack was my husband. 5 years strong on paper. 3 years disconnected in reality. He worked in finance. Long hours, double shifts, emotionally drained and physically spent by the time he walked through the door. I stopped expecting affection. Hell, I stopped expecting eye contact. Our conversations had withered to logistics, bills, groceries. When the landlord would finally fix the broken heater. No, how was your day? No, you look good. I started cooking meals I knew he wouldn't eat, just to fill the apartment with a smell that didn't scream loneliness. And me? I worked from home. Freelance writing, blogs, technical manuals, whatever paid. It gave me too much time to think, and even more time to feel. I was 32, and already dragging my soul behind me like some broken suitcase. That's when I started riding the bus. At first, it was harmless. A loop around the city. A way to get fresh air, pretend I had somewhere to be. The 5:30 p.m. route became my favorite. The golden hour light pouring through the windows, casting dramatic shadows on everyone's tired faces. And then I noticed the driver. He looked like someone who'd never asked for permission a day in his life. Dark stubble hugged his sharp jaw. Thick arms resting easily on the wheel. Eyes like wet stone, unreadable, but heavy with something. His name tag read Arman, though it took me a week to look long enough to actually read it. He never smiled. Not in the way polite people smile. But he'd nod at me, just once, each time I stepped onto the bus, like he knew I wasn't there for the destination. The nod became my drug. I started dressing differently for the rides. Tighter jeans, cologne I hadn't used in a year. I'd sit 3 rows behind him, always on the left side, watching the way his shoulders flexed when he turned the wheel. He drove like he had nowhere else to be, and for some reason, that made me want him even more. I told myself I was being stupid. Married men don't fantasize about bus drivers. Married men don't imagine strong hands on their thighs instead of a steering wheel. Married men don't crave being looked at like prey. But I did. The first time Arman spoke to me, I nearly tripped on my way off the bus. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, voice low and gravelly. I blinked. "Yeah. I guess." "Guess?" His lip twitched. Not quite a smile, but not indifferent either. I nodded. "Yes. Same time." And just like that, I started riding the same route every evening, pretending the city looked different each time. Pretending I wasn't coming undone over a man who probably didn't even remember my name. Jack didn't ask where I went. He didn't notice I left. The gap between us had widened to a canyon, and neither of us had tried to build a bridge. One night, I came home to find Jack asleep on the couch, still in his work clothes, mouth slightly open, TV flickering static over his drained face. I stood there for a moment, watching the man I had vowed to love. I didn't feel anything. Not anger. Not sorrow. Just absence. I wanted to shake him. To ask him why he stopped seeing me. Why he never touched me anymore. Why the sound of my voice didn't seem to reach him across the room. But I didn't. I pulled a blanket over him and went to bed alone. I used to think cheating was something only broken people did. People with no self-control. People who didn't understand commitment. But I was starting to realize, it wasn't about being weak. It was about being starved. When the heart goes too long without being wanted, it begins to look for oxygen in dangerous places. I didn't know what I was doing with Arman. I didn't even know if he saw me as anything more than another lonely man trying to kill time. But I knew the way my body responded to him, alive in a way it hadn't been in years. I knew I spent more time thinking about his voice than my husband's face. And I knew the bus wasn't just a ride anymore. It was an escape. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Jack's soft snores from the living room, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to no one. I think I'm about to do something I can't take back. I told myself I'd skip the bus that day. Just work late, cook dinner, act like a husband. Pretend my heart wasn't running laps every time I saw Arman behind the wheel. But at 5:15 p.m., I was already at the stop. Same spot. Same breeze. Same ache in my chest. The bus hissed to a stop like it already knew I was waiting. Arman barely glanced up as I stepped in, but his voice was unmistakable, low, smoky, tinged with a challenge. "You're late." I wasn't. I was early. But I liked that he said it. "Had to give you time to miss me," I shot back. That got me a look in the mirror. Just his eyes, meeting mine for 2 seconds too long. That was how it started. 2 seconds too long. I slid into my usual seat, third row left. It was ours now, a silent agreement. The city crawled by in silence. I watched him more than the streets. The way his forearms flexed as he pulled the wheel, the way he shifted in his seat, legs spread like he owned the bus and everything on it. Including me, if I let him. When the bus was nearly empty, he spoke again. Not over the intercom. Just loud enough for me to hear. "You ride this route every day now." "You drive this route every day," I replied. He smirked. "I get paid for it. I get something out of it too." His glance in the mirror was quicker this time, but sharper. Like a needle threading between my ribs. At the last stop, everyone else trickled off. I stayed. He turned to face me for the first time, full-on, deliberate. Arman was even more striking up close. 30-something, maybe, but worn in the right places. Eyes dark as thunderclouds. A subtle scar under his lip. Like life had tried to quiet him once but failed. "You planning to ride all night?" he asked. "Maybe," I said, standing up slowly. "Got anywhere to be?" He paused. A long, heavy silence. "You hungry?" he asked. It wasn't a romantic offer. It was something else. An opening. A test. I nodded. We ended up in a greasy 24-hour diner near the depot. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played sad country songs. I let him order for me grilled cheese and black coffee. "I don't usually do this," he said, eyes scanning me like a scan for weakness. "I don't either. But here you are. And here you are." We talked, not about jobs or weather, but about want. He told me he lived alone. Slept during the day. Drove at night. Said the road made sense to him. No promises, just movement. I told him about Jack. The silence. The slow unraveling of two people who once fit. I didn't cry, but I did something worse. I admitted out loud that I was lonely. Arman didn't flinch. He just said, "Yeah. I get that." That's all it took, a sentence. Not sympathy. Recognition. On the ride back, it was just us again. The city shimmered in reflections, neon lights, raindrops smeared across the windshield. He drove slower this time, like dragging the moment out by force. At a red light, he glanced at me through the mirror again. "You ever think about crossing lines?" "All the time," I whispered. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. He pulled the bus into a dark side street, killed the engine. The silence felt like a scream. "Come up here." My legs didn't hesitate, even if my mind did. I walked toward him. Slow, measured, every step erasing the distance between who I was and who I was becoming. I stood beside him, close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. He looked up at me, raw, unreadable. "I've been waiting for you to ask me to stop," he said. I met his eyes. "And I've been waiting for you not to." Then he kissed me. It wasn't careful. It wasn't soft. It was months, maybe years, of unmet hunger crashing into a single moment. His hand gripped the back of my neck, his lips rough, certain. I kissed him back like it was oxygen. Like I'd been underwater for too long and finally surfaced. And I didn't care if I drowned again. We didn't say anything afterward. Just sat there, the the sound of our breathing filling the empty vehicle. His thumb brushed my jaw like he was memorizing it. "I don't do complications," he said, eyes still closed. "Then you picked the wrong man," I replied. He let out a short laugh, bitter maybe, but real. "You going home tonight?" he asked. "I have to." Arman looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the cost of whatever this was, not just for me, but for him too. He started the engine again. The bus hummed back to life. I sat in my seat, 3 rows back, suddenly aware of how far it felt from the front. We didn't speak the rest of the way. But when I got off, he didn't nod. This time, he watched me walk away. And for the first time in a long time, I hoped someone was watching. The next night, I didn't bother pretending I was riding for fresh air. I boarded the bus at 5:30 p.m. with the kind of energy that comes from already knowing how the story ends. Arman didn't greet me. He didn't have to. The heat between us was no longer theoretical. It had weight now. Shape. Memory. I took my usual seat, and for the next 30 minutes, we played our silent game. Me pretending to admire the cityscape, him pretending not to glance at me through the mirror every time we hit a red light. But something had changed. The tension wasn't about possibility anymore. It was about escalation. At the final stop, the bus emptied. An old woman with grocery bags, a high schooler in headphones, a man in a suit who looked too tired to care about anything. When they were gone, I stayed seated. Arman didn't turn off the engine. He looked at me in the mirror and simply said, "Stay seated." The bus moved again. Not along the normal route. He took side streets, dipped under overpasses, weaving through the sleeping parts of the city. It was darker tonight. The sky bruised purple, then black. We ended up in a gravel lot behind an abandoned shopping center. No lights. No movement. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of 2 men who had stopped asking permission. He stood and walked toward me. Slow. Like a storm building over still water. I didn't move. Couldn't. When he stopped in front of me, he didn't ask if I wanted this. He didn't need to. His hand cupped the side of my face, rough fingers grazing skin that hadn't been touched like this in years. I closed my eyes, let my breath slow, let my guilt slip through the cracks of the moment. "I've thought about this more times than I should admit," he murmured. "Then stop thinking," I said. And just like that, we crossed every line we'd tiptoed around. No lights. No audience. No rules. Just mouths pressed against skin, hands sliding over denim, and a heat that swallowed reason whole. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel. It was raw. Urgent. Like we were afraid time would catch us in the act and drag us back to who we were before. I didn't think about Jack. Not then. Not when Arman gripped the back of my neck. Not when he breathed against my throat. Not when he whispered my name like it belonged in his mouth. Afterward, we didn't speak for a long time. We just sat there, both of us wrecked in different ways. I stared out the window. He lit a cigarette and leaned against the door, shirt half-buttoned, pulse still visible on his neck. "You gonna tell him?" Arman asked eventually, voice low and even. "I don't know," I answered. "You planning to stop?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't lie to myself anymore. "I'm already thinking about the next time," I said. Arman nodded like he expected that answer. "It's not gonna stay simple." It never was. He stubbed out the cigarette and looked at me, not like a lover, not even like a friend. Like someone who understood exactly how far gone I already was. "You're not the only one who's lonely, Rolex," he said. "But lonely and lost aren't the same." That hit harder than I expected. I looked away, suddenly unsure of everything except how good his skin had felt against mine. He drove me back without speaking. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't filled with tension anymore, but with something heavier, acknowledgement. When I walked through the door, Jack was in the kitchen reheating leftover pasta. He turned surprised. "Didn't hear you come in." I shrugged. "Went for a walk." He nodded. No suspicion. No curiosity. Just tired acceptance. We sat at the table together, two strangers orbiting a memory of love. Jack talked about work, numbers, budgets. His voice was calm, measured, entirely unaware that I still smelled like someone else's sweat. I studied his face, his hands, the slight gray at his temples. This man used to make me weak with one look. Now he couldn't even make me feel seen. And yet, I didn't hate him. That was the worst part. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to blame him. But the truth was more painful. He hadn't abandoned me. He just faded. Slowly. Quietly. Like a light you don't notice going out until you're sitting in the dark. That night, lying in bed beside him, I didn't sleep. I replayed everything. The way Arman had kissed me like a man starving, the way he hadn't asked me to stay, the way he didn't promise anything. And yet, it had felt like more than a fling. More than a mistake. It felt like a decision I'd already made long before I acted on it. Jack stood in the bathroom doorway one morning, toothbrush in hand, looking at me like he didn't know who he was married to. "You've been different lately." I froze mid-sip of coffee, throat tight. "Different how?" He shrugged. "You come home late. You don't talk much. You stare off like you're somewhere else. Or with someone else." There it was. Not quite an accusation, more like a dying man checking if the life support was even plugged in. I held his gaze, knowing full well I looked guilty. Because I was. He didn't press further. Just returned to brushing his teeth like the thought had already exhausted him. The silence afterward was unbearable. I spent the day trying to write but couldn't get through a sentence. Every word felt dishonest. My entire life felt dishonest. My body was here, in our apartment. My heart? My hunger? They were somewhere else. On a route numbered 247, in a metal beast driven by a man named Arman who touched me like I was worth something again. That night, I didn't wait for the clock. I was at the bus stop early, chest buzzing, palms sweating. When the headlights sliced through the dusk, my heart kicked like it was trying to outrun my ribs. Arman didn't speak when I boarded. His eyes met mine in the mirror, but this time, the look wasn't smoldering. It was stormy. I sat. Watched the city melt into itself as the sun dipped behind buildings and neon signs flickered on like lies. Halfway through the route, he pulled over. Not at a stop. Just some random curb near an auto repair shop. He turned in his seat to face me. "I'm not doing this halfway anymore." I blinked. "Doing what?" "You and me. Whatever this is. I can't keep pulling over in dark alleys, fucking you like a secret, then driving you back to a man who doesn't even see you. Arman, No. Let me say this." He stood, walked back toward me. His boots heavy against the metal floor. He sat beside me for the first time ever. Close. Too close. "I want more," he said. "Not stolen minutes. Not hiding behind mirrors. I want to wake up with you. I want to smell your shampoo on my pillow. I want you to stop looking like you're dying inside every time you walk off this bus." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat was a knot. "I know you love him," Arman continued. "Or maybe you did. But love doesn't mean you owe someone your soul forever, not if you're starving." "I never thought this would go this far," I whispered. "Well, it has. And now you need to decide. Him or me." The sentence split the air like a blade. The ride back was silent. I didn't sit in my usual seat. I sat beside him in the front, our hands never touching, but our breathing completely in sync. When we reached my stop, he didn't open the doors. "Don't go back just to disappear again," he said, quietly. "I don't know how to leave him," I admitted. "You already have," he replied. "You just haven't told him yet." I stepped off the bus into the night, my heart heavier than it had been in months. When I entered the apartment, Jack was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding my phone. There, on the screen, was a photo. Not graphic. Just a grainy shot of Arman's hand on the back of my neck. Intimate. Inescapable. "I saw it weeks ago," Jack said. "I wanted to pretend I didn't. But I guess I hoped you'd stop." He looked up at me then. Not angry. Just small. Do you love him? My breath caught. I don't know if it's love. But it's real. Jack nodded. And me? I didn't answer. That silence was all the answer he needed. He stood, walked past me, and into the kitchen. I didn't follow. I didn't try to fix it. Because I knew I had broken something we'd both stopped watering long ago. The next morning, I packed a bag. I left him a note. Not long, not dramatic. Just honest. I'm sorry. I stopped being yours a long time ago. You deserve someone who shows up. And I need someone who sees me. When I boarded the 5:30 p.m. bus, I carried only one thing besides my bag, a decision. Arman was waiting. This time, when I stepped up, he didn't just nod. He reached for my hand. You sure? I nodded. I've never been more. We didn't talk about the future. We didn't promise forever. But we chose each other, out loud in the open, with no seats between us. And when the bus pulled into traffic, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. For the first time in years, I felt like I was headed somewhere.